Hey, this is Dave for Dave is Just Dave, where we explore abuse recovery with an eye toward positive attraction in the future. And we explore this through many lenses. And today we are going to explore these topics through the lens of the Bachelor universe, the ABC Bachelor universe. Yes, the Bachelor, the Bachelorette, Bachelor Pad, Bachelor in Paradise, Bachelor Winter Games. All of those wonderful, wonderful programs. Now, why would I choose to talk about this? Good question. Um, I think ultimately a lot of folks watch these shows and they create a good occasion to talk about issues of mental health, and I think even some positive lessons that we would sometimes see in these shows. So anything that millions of people are watching, feel like it must have some sort of value. For me personally, I've always enjoyed more talking about the Bachelor universe than I have really actually watching the show. But as I was preparing for this video, I was surprised um, what I was actually able to see going on in the show. And so wanted to talk more about that. So what we're going to talk about specifically is Clare Crawley, who is the new Bachelorette on the show that's premiering on October 13th of this year, 2020. And she became famous for kind of standing up to uh, the person who's widely thought to be the worst Bachelor ever, Juan Pablo. So I thought it might be fun to discuss, is Juan Pablo actually the worst Bachelor ever? And also, is he even, does it rise to the level of abuse? Would we say that maybe Juan Pablo is a narcissist? Or one of the things I want to try and accomplish in these videos is to add new kind of words to the cluster B narcissist mental health framework. And the term I'd like to introduce is, in this one, honest-ist. So when we wonder if somebody's a narcissist or they seem to be hurtful to us, sometimes I wonder if they might be an honest-ist, somebody who is guided by telling the truth, and sometimes that can hurt us. So that was how Claire became famous, by standing up to Juan Pablo, and we're going to explore, is Juan Pablo really so bad? We'll explore it through the lens of three of the women that he chose. Claire, of course, Andi Dorfman, who was also a Bachelor, and Sharleen. I don't happen to know her last name. As far as the source material that I used to prepare this video, I watched The Bachelor Greatest Seasons Ever, and yes, I watched the entire 3 hours in preparing for this video, so I truly suffered for my art. 3 hours of watching Juan Pablo was a bit much, and I even rewatched several parts. So I feel like I've really delved deeply into this material. Also watched the outstanding interview that the wonderful channel Wit and Rye did with Juan Pablo. As far as I know, it's his only interview, and he's very real in the interview. Wit in that interview is an outstanding interviewer. Rye is funny and wonderful. I'll link that in the description. It's just a good opportunity to see the real Juan Pablo. And also, there's a Bachelor fan take recap of the Greatest Seasons Ever episode. I'll link that as well, just to keep you from having to watch the original source material. But if you do want to watch the original source material, I believe it's free at abc.com, or on the ABC app you can watch the Greatest Seasons Ever. So you may want to do that and zoom to these parts to truly understand what I'm talking about. But what I discovered in looking back at this was actually kind of surprising. The real star of this show was actually Sharleen. So when we think about doing things for the right reasons, Sharleen seems to be the one who jumps out as actually doing things for the right reasons. She was there for the right reasons, and when she felt she was no longer there for the right reasons, she left. So I'm going to do a fair amount of reading just because I'm going to quote some folks from the show, and I want to get their quotes right. So Sharleen says about Juan Pablo, he's just so obviously attractive that, I'm not going to lie, I'm interested, in seeing where that could go. So that's what she said about him. So she was just kind of smitten with his actual appearance, and obviously he's a super good looking guy, and she was, I think, really taken with him and seemed to have a definite playful attraction with Juan Pablo. And she even, Sharleen is an opera singer, and she even was vulnerable with him and did some opera singing for him. And it was really beautiful, honestly. Like, of course, she's a beautiful singer, a beautiful woman, and her being vulnerable like that with Juan Pablo, you could tell that she felt like she really had been vulnerable, and I think she really genuinely liked him. But after I think she had done that, and she started reflecting on it, she realized that it was unlikely that Juan Pablo was really the guy for her. So she goes to his apartment, little lair or whatever, where ABC is putting him up, and she actually breaks up with him. And she is crying in this, and Juan Pablo cries as well. So when we explore the question, how terrible is Juan Pablo really, and is Juan Pablo a narcissist? The way that he responds, I'll quote him here, when she breaks up with him, she says, "I feel like I wasted your time." Juan Pablo says softly to her, look at me. You didn't waste my time at all. Don't feel that way." And this, to me, does not seem like something an abusive person would say. She says that she thinks that she made the right choice for me, but she just wished that she didn't have to make choices. Well, yes, that is hard. But this is remarkable, right? Sharleen, who actually has a new podcast, I guess, which I discovered in researching this as well. I'll link that in the description. Was less than 30 years old. She may have even been less than 25. And she made a really responsible choice to walk away from Juan Pablo when she realized that it wasn't going to work out for her. And so when we think kind of the semi-ridiculous question, could we learn something from watching The Bachelor? We absolutely could. I mean, we could be a lot more like Sharleen. When is your best chance to get out of what will be a bad relationship? As soon as possible. She got out right at the beginning. It was hurtful to her because she did have a strong crush or strong infatuation, but she was able to get out quickly. And I honestly think it looks like Juan Pablo was possibly had a chance to fall in love with Sharleen. So he even says, you have to have guts to be honest in this situation. And I think that that's absolutely true. She did have guts. I would submit possibly more guts than the people who actually became bachelorettes, Andi Dorfman and Clare Crawley. But let's go on and talk more about Juan Pablo's behavior with Andi. So when we look at how he treated Sharleen, was not abusive, and was he a narcissist? I would say no. Let's talk about Andi Dorfman, though. This is the famous incident where we have the "it's not okay" mantra, which I think was even the title of Andi Dorfman's book, "It's Not Okay," or her first book. I think she has multiple books now. Classic Bachelor scene. They're in the fantasy suite, and the next day she comes to him, tells him that it's not working out, and he basically just says it's okay, and he doesn't seem that upset. Earlier in the episode, Juan Pablo says to her, "I'm glad you're here." So again, probably not something that an abusive person would say. And she responds, "I can't wait to have a family." He responds, "You will." a more abusive type person in my mind would say, I absolutely want to have a family with you. I can't wait to have babies with you. I'm falling in love with you. I think you're amazing. Juan Pablo says, I'm glad you're here. She says, I can't wait to have a family. It's kind of the ultimate dare to say, hey, let's have babies together. And all he says is, you will. So is he a narcissist or an honest-ist here? I feel like it's more honest-ist than narcissist. However, they go to the fantasy suite. Andi says, the fantasy suite turned into a nightmare. All he wanted to do is kind of say it's okay and give me a kiss. He asked no questions. Okay, well, what we know about narcissistic type folks or toxic type folks is they love to ask questions. That's called the love bombing stage. So in the love bombing stage, and I've got a video on that, link in the description, they are going to besiege their victim with questions and want to know everything about them so that they can create a false persona to attract them. So Juan Pablo doesn't even ask any questions. He has no means by which to create a false persona to attract Andi Dorfman or Clare or Sharleen. Andi says, it doesn't seem real to me. I've never been with someone who asked me so little about myself. Well, what might have been going on here? I think she made it to Fantasy Suite, so that's top 3. I always wonder, do people keep somebody around that they feel like isn't in love with them because they don't want to hurt anybody? So anybody that they feel is truly falling in love, they may cut earlier so as to spare them the hurt, especially if they're an empathic person. So maybe she thought, or maybe Juan Pablo thought, she wasn't really falling for him. It seems like she probably wasn't. She was able to walk away. And she's just hurt that he wasn't really interested in her, didn't ask about her, and possibly was just into her for her appearance or whatever. She, in her car ride away, actually imitates his accent in saying it's not okay. I think that this played probably in 2014. I don't know how that would play now. I don't think you could really imitate somebody's accent today. I'm sure she didn't have any real ill intent in doing that, but it seems odd looking at it now. And what better thing for Juan Pablo to do to keep the most attractive people around, right? His final 3, Andi, Clare, and Nikki, and then plus Sharleen, who he was probably falling in love with. I think many people would agree these were probably the most attractive people on the show. So he really ultimately seems to be a person who just kept the best looking people around. In his video interview with Whit and Rye, he talks about how even with the people that he spent the most time with, he spent at most 30 to 40 hours with these people, and says that it's impossible to fall in love during 30 to 40 hours. This seems honestly pretty reasonable. Andi says when she was asked if she really fell in love, did she really think she was going to get married? She says, to this day, 100% yes. I basically just poured my entire heart out and all he said was okay. And I have actually been on a miniature version of this type of show, like Bachelorette, Bachelor type show. And I will say that it is intense. And you have kind of an easy job as the contestant where you're kind of waiting for your opportunity to talk to the star, the Bachelor or Bachelorette, and maybe you only have 15 minutes to talk to them, or maybe you only have a half hour to talk. Well, what are you going to do during that half hour? You are going to pour your heart out. I mean, you almost don't have any choice because you don't know if you're even ever going to get to see them again. So you have this one job, which is to like this one person. Meanwhile, the person who's the star has to select from all these people that are pouring their heart out, and it's kind of immense emotional pressure. So certainly when I went through the process, one of the first people I thought of, Andi Dorfman, in the unlikely event that you would see this, I love you and I empathize with you. I also had the feeling it's not okay. But when I step back and reflect on it, I feel that it is okay because I didn't have any choice but to pour my heart out. That doesn't mean that if I was ultimately rejected in that means that something bad was done by the star of the show. That's just my opinion. But of course, let's talk about Clare. So, sorry this video is running a little long, but there's a lot that I want to get in here. Clare, who's now going to be the Bachelorette starting October 13th and became famous for standing up to Juan Pablo. This is what Juan Pablo says about Clare. He says, "I get hot talking about Clare." There's a scene that they show in the Greatest Seasons Ever where she's wearing basically like a tank top and shorts, and he can't stop talking about how hot it is. She says, "Really? You think this is hot? Is it hotter than my rose ceremony dress?" He says, "Absolutely." Like, it's very clear Juan Pablo is extremely hot for Clare, and she is extremely hot. This is where I want to introduce another term. I want to introduce the term, which I think is mainly for the Bachelor universe, but you could use it in your personal life as well. The term is Smashyface. When you Smashyface someone, it's when they're asking you a difficult question, you respond by simply just kissing them. This is used a lot on The Bachelor, and it's used with Clare, I will say. So Clare says, "I'm just," and she says it in kind of a cutesy voice that's very, I don't know, just obviously cutesy. And she says, "I'm just like falling in love with you." His response is a pure smashy face. He just kisses her. He does not reciprocate. I think almost any time you say "I love you" to someone, it's what I would call, here's another new term, reciprocal dare. You're daring somebody to reciprocate what you're saying. So, "Hey, you're the greatest lover I've ever had." That's a dare to reciprocate. "I'm falling in love with you." Dare to reciprocate. She dares him. He smashy faces. He tells her to trust him. So this is maybe a little manipulative. They cut to him. He says about Clare, "She's hot, she's sexy, she's cute, she kisses, ay, ay, ay." That's what he says. He doesn't throw in, "She's intelligent, she has a nice personality. I really like her, feelings about the book Crime and Punishment." None of that is included. And I think he's legit super hot for her and is interested in possibly, in the short 30 to 48 hour time span that he has to spend with these women, in picking the ones that he's most attracted to. So we have the famous helicopter scene where they have a moment alone, and Claire is very upset by what he says. He says something that's quite scandalous. I will clean it up. He says to her, "I love having sex with you," only he uses a bad word to describe it, and says, "I love having sex with you, but I don't know you." Again, is Juan Pablo a narcissist or an honest-ist? I think here he's an honest-ist. He does love having sex with Claire. I think they did hook up at some point, but he doesn't know her. They've only known each other for 25 to 30 hours. So he's really being completely honest, and I would say not manipulative, other than smashy facing, but smashy facing is still not actually lying. So if somebody says "I love you" and you say "I love you" back, you don't really love them back. That is worse than just kissing them, I think. Also, it's difficult when you've only known somebody for 25 to 30 hours and never discussed it. I love you. What does that mean? You might be better off to kind of be more descriptive about the exact feelings that you have. So Claire then becomes suspicious of Juan Pablo at this point when he says, "I love having sex with you, but I don't know you," even though he's only known her for 30 hours. She says, "If he can't tell me that this relationship goes further than a physical connection, I'm out of here. I've been down this road before. I've been in these type of relationships where they don't see more than that and they don't want more than that." So Claire has, as a very hot person, lived this life where men wanted her for her hotness and didn't want anything more. I certainly sympathize with Claire. I can't empathize because I don't know that I've had this experience a whole lot. But she is probably kind of projecting this onto Juan Pablo. So she's been hurt by this in the past. She wants people to be interested in her for her. It's the most human thing in the world. It's what everybody wants. However, there's zero evidence that happens that we see, I think, that he is actually falling in love with her for any other reason than that she's hot. So she then confronts him about it. She goes to his little bachelor lair, his little apartment, and asks him about it. And this is what Juan Pablo says. There's parts of you I like. There's parts of you I don't know that I might not like. And there's parts of me you wouldn't like. We don't know. So parts of you that I like, there's parts of you that I don't know. So he just knows that he likes her. He doesn't know what bad parts of her may exist. And he says it's possible that there's even parts of me that you wouldn't like. We don't know. Again, is he a narcissist or an honest-ist? Seems like an honest-ist. He then says, am I ready? Do I know the person as much as I would love to know somebody to propose? He's saying this to Clare. It's hard for me because I have to make the decision. She then gets excited, stops him and says, that's what I want to hear more of. And he's kind of taken by that. And then she smashy-faces him. She starts kissing him and kind of gets him to shut up about him opening up about his difficult time making this decision. So I would submit she may not have really wanted to hear what he was going to say. Juan Pablo then says to her, I believe that if I do choose you, that we would have a baby very quickly. Now, why does he say that? Because he's so intensely attracted to her, he's not going to be able to keep his hands off her, with full consent, of course. Consent is important. But he's going to have a baby immediately because he can't keep his hands off Clare. Clare then says, in a confessional moment, I'm more than ready to start a life with him. And then we cut to the proposal scene where he's got to choose between Clare and Nikki. She shows up. And I will say, as far as him being narcissist versus honest-ist, he is a bit cruel here. He lets her go into her little speech before telling her ultimately that he's not choosing her. This is the moment where Clare Crawley becomes famous and launches her career that still exists to this day in the Bachelor universe. She says, what you made me go through, I wouldn't want my kids to have a father like you. He then somewhat cruelly says that he's glad he didn't pick her. And Chris Harrison, in this episode of Greatest Seasons Ever, then proclaims, this is where all of America fell in love with Clare. So Sharleen walked away, Andi walked away, Clare ultimately didn't walk away, but resented the fact that Juan Pablo didn't choose her. Is this fair? I don't think so. I don't know that, we don't know what happened in the fantasy suite. We don't know what he might have said, but all throughout this entire Greatest Seasons Ever recap episode, we see evidence that Juan Pablo values honesty and values telling the truth and not saying anything that isn't true. So what I would say about Clare or anybody that's on The Bachelor, do you want love or do you want to win? If you want to win, you're not there for the right reasons. That includes if you want to get cast as the Bachelorette or the Bachelor later. So the question, is Juan Pablo that terrible? I am going to say the answer is no to the question, is he a narcissist or is he an honest-ist? I would say the verdict is he's an honest-ist. However, Clare felt that she was kind of abused by him or that he wasn't fair to her. Andi also felt hurt by it. I'm not saying that they're absolutely wrong. I just say that I can't see the evidence of a truly abusive person here, a truly narcissistic type person. What I see is a person who is consumed by the idea that he must tell the truth, and he seems to very carefully tell the truth. He may be a person that's shallow in that he's only interested in physical appearance. Maybe he's grown from that since that time and is interested in people for more than that. It did seem like he was interested in Sharleen possibly for more than that. But if you've had an experience like Clare, like Andi, where you feel hurt by a given situation, where you feel like you were taken for granted, forgive yourself. You didn't know what you were getting into when you got cast on The Bachelor or a similar show. Take responsibility because you certainly had clues in the case of Clare, and I think in the case of Andi, that there was no reciprocating when they were kind of putting themselves out there, so he really didn't probably have feelings. Resolve to learn from that, see what happens when you start to feel that somebody isn't falling in love with you, but you feel like you are. Maybe it's time to get out of that type of situation. If you've got the courage to do so, be more like Sharleen. She did have the courage to do so. If you are hurting, make sure you take care of yourself, eat, exercise, socialize. And it's only natural when you've been hurt to have many thoughts, many reflections, many ruminations about it. The best thing to do, however, is keep these thoughts to yourself or to close trusted friends, but really to yourself is ultimately best. You never know who might share what. You want to keep your own thoughts and ruminations away from your abuser. Why is this? Your abuser will only use it to hurt you, toy with you, or ignore you. That will only make you feel worse. So those are my feelings on Juan Pablo, and is he the worst person ever? Certainly looking forward to seeing Clare on this season of The Bachelor and hopefully finding more important issues of mental health, abuse recovery, positive attraction to talk about. And thanks for watching. Sorry it was a little bit long. And stay tuned for more videos on these topics of abuse recovery and positive attraction. Thanks for watching.